Hello, my name is Joshua Meyer, and I am going to talk to you about Russian theater from about the 1820s to 1900. What bookends those? Well, during the 1700s, the Russians were in love with France. Most of the aristocracy spoke French, they watched French plays, read French books, and so on. So for all this love and affection, Napoleon decided to invade Russia in 1812. So French everything lost its hold on Russia, and Russian literature changed. You saw a love of things Russian, peasants, the motherland, more accurate depictions of the lives of nobles, all things that were probably reactions to the ardent love of French work. Now, on the back end, our book is different. In 1894, Nicholas II became Tsar. Over the next 20 years, a change of events happened that changed the Russian and world political structure. In 1898, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party was established by the Marxists. In 1903, Lenin became the Bolshevik leader, and in 1914, World War I broke out. At this point, theater had entered a whole new communist era and would never again be the same. We'll go through the lives of a few of the major writers and critics of the era. Alexander Ostrovsky, Nikolai Gogol, Alexei Pzimsky, and Konstantin Stanislavski. Let's start with Nikolai Gogol, most famous for his book Dead Souls. He was probably a Ukrainian. He was one of the forerunners of realism, although he still had elements of romanticism in his work and some surrealism. He became famous for his commentary on Russian politics and way of life. The Government Inspector was his most famous play and satirized greed and political corruption in Russia. The play follows a civil servant who is mistaken to be an inspector. The civil servant uses the mistake to make large sums of money at the expense of the townspeople before the real inspector arrives. Next is Alexei Pzimsky, and he started to really erase the last vestiges of surrealism. He's credited with making the first work showing the realistic life of peasants in Russia. He worked as a math professor and also acted. He is most well known for his recitations of none other than Gogol's work. Pzimsky's performance in Gogol's Marriage got him invites to perform all over Moscow. He also worked as a civil servant, and his touring of the provinces he was in charge of forced significant changes in how he saw the world. His work was very natural and grounded, much to the chagrin of his professors at university. He is arguably the most notable figure of the natural school of Russian writing. His most notable play was probably A Bitter Fate, which dramatizes the plight of Russian peasants. Next, we have Alexander Ostrovsky. He took the natural ideals and made them key components of the Russian national theater's development. He was the first to tackle not just the peasant and noble perspective of Russia, but the merchant class perspective. His commentary of the ethics or lack thereof of the merchant class drew criticism from them. The criticism grew to such a fervor that after the release of the play It's a Family Affair, We'll Settle It Ourselves, he was dismissed from public service. The good part of his dismissal is that he threw himself entirely into the world of writing. From 1851 onward, we would see 30 years of Russia's National Theater in Moscow opening with a new Ostrovsky play. He is also one of the only Russian playwrights to be almost exclusively devoted to theater. This moves us to the last person I will talk about in this time period. Konstantin Stanislavski, maybe aside from Gogol, is the only name which the average viewer is going to be aware of. Stanislavski is the acting component of this natural movement. While the writers were focusing on writing naturally, Stanislavski was focused on making emotions based in reality. There could be naturalness on stage, which was a natural outpouring of what we saw in the written side of Russian playwriting earlier on in the century. This period of Russian theater and literature, really ranging from the early 1800s until the 20th century, was a powerful time where different writers gave us different looks at an era. Gogol started us down a path of realism, still with his hints of romanticism and surrealism, and discussed political issues in Russia and the greed of the noblemen. Alexei Pzimsky gave us a look at the problem of the peasant and showed Russia from their perspective, and Ostrovsky took it to the class of the merchants. Finally, we discussed how Stanislavski carried out naturalism through acting, a force that still impacts us today. All greatly contributed to this movement in the theatrical world in different ways, but gives you a brief taste, and I hope you enjoyed it.